Roland had spent his last life as a broke civil engineer, a man with a sharp mind, empty pockets, and no place in the world. He knew how bridges stood, why walls cracked, how cities failed. Powerful people wasted the work of everyone beneath them. But none of that mattered on the day his old life ended. When his eyes opened again, he was no longer in a rented room. Job rejections, unpaid bills, and failure no longer surrounded him. He was sitting inside a dark medieval chamber, wearing expensive clothes, a golden cup of wine beside his hand, and an old man calling him Your Highness. At first, Roland could not understand anything. The chamber felt ancient, cold, and completely unfamiliar. The air smelled of candle smoke, iron, and strange herbs. The walls were stone. The furniture looked royal but old. His body felt lighter, stronger, and younger than before. The memories of another man began crashing into his mind. He was inside the body of Prince Roland, a useless noble who ruled a forgotten border town that no one respected. A prince who had lived like a walking corpse. A prince who had just been murdered. The old advisor in front of him believed the prince had only been sleeping. But Roland saw the wine glass. He noticed the bitter smell still hanging around the cup. He saw how one servant girl had left the room moments before the advisor arrived. The poisoned wine had turned the palace itself into a crime scene. The prince had not collapsed from wine. He had been murdered, and Roland was inside the corpse. Only one impossible fact explained the opened eyes. A stranger from another world had inherited the dead prince's face. Roland barely had time to breathe before the advisor spoke again. Before he understood the world, they demanded his first order: execute the witch. Roland heard the crowd from beyond the walls, cheering, laughing, hungry for death. Nobles had gathered like they were attending a festival. Common people were shouting for the witch to be hanged. Somewhere in that crowd stood the maid who had poisoned him, frozen in fear because the dead prince had somehow walked out alive. Roland stepped onto the balcony and looked down. In the center of the square stood a young woman in chains. She was dirty, exhausted, and badly treated, but she did not look like a monster. Her eyes were deep blue, calm and terrified at the same time. Everyone below was waiting for the prince to give the final order. Kill her, and the town would cheer. Delay, and the nobles would question him. Refuse, and he would make enemies before he even understood this world. The royal knight warned him that witches must be killed quickly. If other witches heard one had been captured, they might come to rescue her. But Roland was not ready to execute someone just because a crowd wanted blood. He had barely been alive in this world for minutes. Already they wanted him to become a murderer. So he raised his voice and gave an order no one expected. Instead of giving them blood, Roland postponed the execution and stole one night to think. But Roland calmly replied that if more witches came, they could catch them together. It sounded like strategy, but in truth, he was buying time. He needed to know what witches were, why people feared them, why this young woman had to die. He also needed to find out who had poisoned him and why. As he returned to the mansion, the maid who had served the poisoned wine kept her head lowered. Roland did not yet know her crime, but he noticed fear in her eyes. In this new world, everyone had secrets. The town feared witches. The church controlled the truth. Somewhere behind the curtain, someone had already tried to erase him before his new life had even begun. Inside his chamber, Roland studied maps, ledgers, and old reports. The ledgers showed a city being drained, not governed. Border City was a mining town on the edge of the kingdom. rich in ore, but poor in everything else. Corrupt nobles had drained the city for years, giving away its minerals in exchange for just enough food to keep the workers alive. The old prince had ignored it all. He had been weak, lazy, and politically useless. Now Roland had inherited not a kingdom, but a collapsing machine. When Roland looked in the mirror, he almost laughed. The second was better. He still had the mind of an engineer. If this world had magic, monsters, and corrupt priests, then he would answer with calculation, construction, trade, and controlled chaos. First, he needed the truth about the witch. At lunch, the financial minister Barav confronted him directly. Why had the prince delayed the execution? Roland ignored the accusation and asked the real question. Why did witches have to die? Barav explained the story everyone believed. Years ago, witches had been seen in the western forest. A strange symbol was found on a stone. The mark of the Witch Cooperative Association. Witches were said to be gathering from different lands in search of a secret holy mountain, a place where they could live away from mankind. The church called this dangerous. Common people called it demonic. Roland listened without interrupting. In his old world, fear had always been useful to powerful people. If the church wanted everyone to hate witches, there had to be a reason. Barav continued. Witches possessed powers no human could understand. A recent mine collapse had revealed the captured girl's identity. She had burned a man alive, and because fire could not kill witches, hanging was the only execution method available. That detail made Roland stop. Fire could not harm witches. Their powers ignored the natural rules he understood. If this was true, then magic was not a superstition, and a real force could be studied. Against the warnings of his knight and advisor, Roland went to meet the prisoner himself. They expected the witch to burst into flames and kill them all. But when Roland reached the cage, he saw the same young woman from the square. Her name was Anna. She had the calm voice of someone who had already accepted death. Roland asked what had happened in the mine. Anna told him the truth. Her father had been trapped under fallen timber. Another miner tried to steal the savings he had earned through years of brutal work. Even while crushed, her father fought to protect that money. When Anna arrived, the thief was about to kill him. Her flames burned the man before he could finish the crime. Then came the part that hit harder. Anna's deepest wound was not the cage. It was her father taking church gold for her name. Anyone who helped expose a witch received 25 gold coins. To her father, that reward was enough to trade his daughter's life for survival. Roland felt anger rise inside him, but he hid it. He asked Anna to show her power. Barav warned him that this was madness. But Roland stepped close to the cage and noticed the iron collar around her neck. That collar was suppressing her magic. Without hesitation, he reached in and pulled it away. The instant the collar came off, fire burst around Anna like a storm, finally breathing. The advisor shouted for everyone to run. But Roland did not move. The flames spread, twisted, and circled her body without touching anything outside the cage. Anna stood inside the fire like it was part of her breath. Her clothes burned away, but her skin remained untouched. She looked less like a demon, more like a person trapped inside a power she had never been allowed to understand. Anna looked at him and said he had seen enough. Instead, Roland removed his coat and placed it over her shoulders. Then he said the words that changed everything. He was not going to kill her. He wanted her to work for him. The next morning, Roland began testing Anna's flames like an engineer examining a new energy source. He tried to compare her magic with thermodynamics, heat transfer, combustion, and material resistance. The results made no sense. Her fire produced heat without normal fuel. It obeyed her will more than nature. It was impossible by his old world's laws, yet real enough to melt metal and bake stone. Berav arrived with another problem. The public believed the witch had to die. If Anna stayed alive openly, the nobles and church would move against him. Roland chose a brutal lie. Another prisoner would die, and the town would bury the wrong witch. The town would believe the witch was dead. Anna would vanish from public sight and work secretly under contract. And Roland would keep the most powerful person in the city alive. To Berov, this was dangerous. To Roland, it was only the beginning. He demanded 10 years of financial records, tax reports, mining output, textile production, steel production, ceramics, food imports, and trade routes. Berov was stunned. The old prince had never cared about anything. This prince was asking the questions of a ruler preparing for war. Roland had already reached his first major conclusion. The crown ruled land, but the church ruled truth, fear, and who had the right to reign. Only a king crowned by the Pope was considered legitimate. Princes and princesses ruled territories, but the church ruled belief. If Roland ever wanted freedom, he could not simply become a better prince. He had to build a system outside the church's control. The key to that system was the witches. The church had taught the world that witches were demons. If Roland could prove witches were not evil, if people saw them healing, building, protecting the city, then the church's greatest lie would crack. That was why Anna mattered. She was proof that the world had been taught to fear the wrong enemy. Later, Roland found Anna sitting alone in the garden. She had signed a work contract that promised her 1 gold coin per month, more money than her father could earn in a year. But wealth did not remove the shame she carried. She still believed she deserved punishment for killing a man. She believed witches were dangerous, because everyone had told her so since childhood. Roland sat beside her and apologized. She had survived betrayal, imprisonment, and near execution, and instead of giving her rest, he had pulled her into his plans. Anna asked why he saved her. He did not answer with a speech at first. Roland placed a flower in Anna's hand, called it poison, and let fear prove his point. Anna dropped it immediately. Roland smiled and told her he had lied. That, he said, was what the church had done to witches. Power was not good or evil by itself. People had been taught to see witch power as a curse, so they feared it before they understood it. Anna argued that her power really was dangerous. One mistake could burn a person alive. Roland did not deny it. Medicine was dangerous in the wrong hands, but a dangerous thing could still protect people if it was controlled. If Anna died, nothing would change. Her father would keep hating witches. The church would keep hunting them. More girls would be dragged to execution platforms. If Anna lived, learned control, and stood beside him, they could build a city where witches did not have to hide. Anna had never heard a noble speak of witches like people. She wanted to live like an ordinary person. She wanted to walk outside without being hunted. Roland reached out his hand and promised that such a world was possible, only if she stopped accepting the church's story as truth. That night, the maid who had poisoned him wrote a secret letter. She reported that the prince had changed. He had delayed the witch execution, demanded financial records, acted nothing like the man she had been sent to kill. The letter was passed into the darkness, moving toward the people who wanted Roland erased. Meanwhile, Roland's reports confirmed the scale of disaster. Border City mined the wealth, but Longsong decided whether its people ate. But Longsong did not treat the city like an ally. It treated the city like livestock. It gave only enough food to keep workers alive through the year. During bad winters, when monsters came down from Dragonspine Mountain, The people fled to Longsong's shelters and survived on whatever scraps they were given. 2 years ago, a long demonic period had lasted 4 months. Many people had starved because no mining meant no ore, and no ore meant no food. Roland saw the trap immediately. Longsong controlled Border City through hunger and fear. The city had resources, but no bargaining power. It had ore, but no food independence. Previous nobles had accepted the arrangement because they profited personally. Roland gave a new order. With one order, Roland broke the chain and cut Border City free from Longsong's hunger. The city would sell ore to Willow City instead, even at half price if necessary. Buy enough food to survive winter without begging. Barov objected. Willow City might not want that much ore. Selling at a discount could empty their reserves. But Roland was planning beyond the next month. Once food was secured, they would use the river, build boats, expand trade, turn Border City from a trapped mining pit into a commercial gateway. Then Barov mentioned the real problem. Winter was only 3 months away. When the demonic period began, monsters would come from the mountain. Without Longsong's fortress, the city had nowhere safe to run. Border City had no walls strong enough to protect 2,000 people. Roland summoned captains and hunters who had seen the beasts. They described mutant wolves, giant bees, flying hybrids, creatures with unnatural strength, and terrifying senses. When signs appeared, signal fires sent the population fleeing across the river toward Longsong's fortress. The river was deep and fast, and beasts rarely crossed it. Abandoning the city every winter could never be a real future. He studied the ground, the river, the distance, and the escape route. Only 600 meters separated the city's vulnerable side from the river bend. Carter realized what the prince was thinking and went pale. Was he planning to stay during the demonic period? Roland said yes. Carter warned him that they did not have enough soldiers, enough space in the castle. They had strength, but not enough trained hands or time. Roland looked at the open land and gave an engineer's answer. They would build the strongest wall this world had ever seen. The wall project began with confusion. Workers mixed limestone and clay, while Anna used controlled fire to heat the materials. Roland ordered gypsum, added and crushed the mixture into powder. Carter watched the process with no idea what he was seeing. This was not magic either, at least not the kind this world understood. When the powder was ready, Roland told Carter to mix it with water and pour it between stones. Carter obeyed, though his face showed doubt. By morning, the wet mixture had hardened into something solid, tough, and almost stone-like. Carter struck it with a tool, expecting it to break. Roland named it cement. To the people of Border City, it looked like a miracle. To Roland, it was technology. Cement meant they no longer needed perfectly carved stones. They could speed up construction, reinforce structures, and create a wall in months instead of years. He was not simply building a barrier, but the project still moved too slowly. Carter was loyal and hardworking, but he was not a master builder. Barov warned that a wall of this scale required professional planning. Border City had no skilled stonemasons left. Roland ordered him to search Longsong, Willow City, anywhere necessary. Around the same time, near the execution ground stood Karl Van Wet, the teacher who believed Anna had already died. He had taught her letters before fear turned her name into a death sentence. He had recently discovered another student with witch powers. The thought of losing another child to the church haunted him. When townspeople asked him to read a royal job notice, he saw a chance. The city was hiring laborers and master builders at unusually high wages. Carl ran to the mansion and confessed his past. He had once worked on palace construction projects, including Ashford, a famous building disaster. The official story said the workers had caused the collapse and been executed. Carl revealed the truth. Corrupt administrators used poor stone and ignored warnings. When the structure failed, the powerful escaped blame and the workers were slaughtered. Carl survived only because he fled before the purge. By skill, he was exactly what Roland needed. Barov recommended using him despite the risk. Roland did better. He pardoned Carl and appointed him master builder and member of the administrative office. Carl had expected chains. For the first time in years, he looked like a man who had been given back his name. Roland showed him the planned wall location. Carl calculated the work and said that with 150 people, traditional construction could take 3 years. Roland answered that they had 3 months. Carl adjusted the plan. Reduce height and width at first. Finish the foundation quickly. Rely on speed. When Carl saw cement harden by dawn, the impossible stopped sounding impossible. He became excited like a craftsman seeing the future open in front of him. Before leaving, Carl wanted to share a secret. At that moment, Anna entered the room. Carl froze. Anna recognized him as her teacher. Overcome with relief, he knelt and thanked Roland for saving her. Roland told him plainly that he did not believe witches were demons, would not hunt them like the church. That was when Carl trusted him enough to reveal the secret. There was another witch in the city. Carl's next secret was riskier. Another witch was hiding inside Border City. At first, Carl misunderstood Anna's presence. He thought Roland had kept her as part of a royal harem. Barov burst out laughing, and Carl turned red with embarrassment. Roland corrected him quickly. Anna was not a toy. She was the reason the cement project existed. Nina was more complicated. She was the daughter of a noble family. If her identity became public, the political damage could be enormous. Roland ordered Carl to bring her under the excuse of a lesson. Barov arranged a secret route through the underground kitchen. When Nina arrived, she was shy, embarrassed, and terrified. Carl had foolishly repeated the harem misunderstanding, so the poor girl could barely look at the prince. Roland used the ultimate weapon against nervous children: cake. Nina tried to resist, but her eyes betrayed her. Then Anna appeared, and Nina ran into her arms crying. To Nina, Anna was like an older sister. Seeing her alive broke through all the fear at once. Roland asked how Nina discovered her power. She had found a small injured bird with broken legs. She wanted to save it, and a strange sticky liquid came from her hands, wrapping around the bird until its wounds healed. Roland tested the ability on injured animals. Nina could close wounds, reattach severed parts if the part remained, and restore damaged flesh. But she could not regrow what was missing, and she could not revive the dead. Carter saw the tests and finally understood the prince's plan. Witches were not just dangerous. Anna could build defenses with fire. Nina could heal. If people saw this truth, the church's demon story would begin to collapse. But Nina could not stay openly in the mansion. Her noble family would react violently, and enemies were already watching. Roland ordered daily secret training. Nina's power had to be controlled before the demonic period. When the monsters came, healing might decide whether the city survived. Far from Border City, Princess Garcia received news from her knight. Her fleet had returned from a successful raid led by a captain named Drake. The loot was enough to feed an army for a year. Garcia was pleased and promoted Drake on the spot, giving him command of the Velengraf fleet and the spoils. The assassination attempt on Prince Roland had failed. The poison had been placed in his wine, but according to reports, it only made him sleep for a few seconds. Garcia's expression changed. She did not know the truth. The poison had worked perfectly. The original Roland had died. The man walking in his body was someone else. To Garcia, failure meant incompetence. She ordered the alchemist Ambise, who had made the poison, to be executed. If a tool failed, she discarded it. As for the maid inside Roland's mansion, Garcia decided she might get one more chance, as long as she had not been exposed. Back in Border City, the Longsong ambassador arrived to collect minerals. He expected the usual exchange, or for food, with Longsong deciding the value. Instead, he saw ships from Willow City unloading fresh supplies. Barrels of grain, meat, cheese, vegetables, and preserved goods filled the docks. Roland greeted the ambassador with a feast so rich it made Longsong look unnecessary. The ambassador stared at the fresh dishes and understood the insult immediately. The ambassador was confused by Roland's eating tools, thin wooden sticks instead of silverware. Roland explained chopsticks with deliberate casualness, saying they were cheaper, cleaner. Roland promised those simple wooden sticks would soon become common in his town. Every detail of the meal carried a message. Border City was changing. When the ambassador demanded overdue ore deliveries, Roland blamed mine collapses and paused production. He claimed he had only 2 months of stock available, could not exchange it for Longsong's unfair food rates. 2 years earlier, people had starved because the fortress provided too little. Roland would not let that happen again. From now on, trade with Longsong was suspended. The ambassador tried to negotiate. If Border City was selling to Willow City at 50% under market value, Longsong would buy at 30% under market value. Roland pretended to consider it, then asked whether all 6 ruling members of Longsong would agree. The ambassador promised to present the proposal. Roland smiled because he already knew the answer. Before leaving, the ambassador warned that the demonic period was close. Border City should send its people to the fortress early, before the roads became dangerous. Roland answered that his people would not go. He would build a wall and defend them himself. At Longsong Fortress, Duke Ryan and the ruling families laughed when they heard this. Against demonic beasts? The ambassador argued that helping Roland might be profitable. Cheap minerals reduced shelter costs and future cooperation could benefit Longsong. But Duke Ryan did not think like a merchant. Profit meant nothing if the other side could not be controlled. Border City had to be punished for stepping out of line. The next morning, Roland gathered the people of Border City. He told them Longsong had refused to support them properly after the mine collapse. He reminded them of the winter when their families starved in shelters. Longsong measured food by ore output. This year, the demonic period might last even longer. If nothing changed, the same tragedy would repeat. Then he revealed the food stores: bread, meat, cheese, grain, and supplies enough to survive winter. For years, they had believed survival depended on begging Longsong. Now, their prince stood before them with proof that another path existed. But food alone was not enough. Longsong was angry, so Roland announced the formation of a militia army. Any person willing to defend the city would be paid 25 silver coins. If someone died in battle, their family would receive 5 gold coins in compensation. They could starve under Longsong's roof, or stand behind their own wall and fight for their own homes. One by one, workers raised their hands. Miners, smiths, young men, older men, even people who had never held weapons before. Fear did not vanish, but shame turned into anger, and anger became courage. For once, the miners heard a prince ask them to stand, not kneel. It sounded like a city preparing to be born. That night, Roland received shipments of powder, ice, and snow. Carter did not understand why. Roland only said it was for his next experiment, a new kind of magic. But when he returned to his room, another glass of wine was waiting. Roland stepped forward to check. A woman appeared from the shadows with a blade against his throat. For one frozen second, he thought the assassin had finally come. But she pushed him away and said they were not enemies. On her clothes was the symbol of the sacred mountain. She was from the Witch Association. Her name was Bibble. She thanked him for saving Anna and Nina. She had come to rescue the captured witch, only to discover that the prince had already protected her. Bibble had been invisible inside the city for a week, watching Roland's every move. Bibble revealed the truth. The poison worked, and without her, Roland would have died twice. The maid had tried again, but Bibble had stopped the cup. Roland realized his mansion was not safe, but Bibble had not come only to warn him. She intended to take Anna and Nina to the Witch Association, to the place witches called the Sacred Mountain. Roland refused. The demonic period was 2 months away. The mountains would soon be buried in snow and crawling with monsters. Sending them away now was too dangerous. Bibble argued that humans would never accept witches. If the church discovered them, Border City would become a battlefield. Roland answered that hiding forever only helped the church. If witches stayed and helped defend the city, people would see the truth with their own eyes. Fear could be rewritten, but only if someone survived long enough to prove it wrong. Bibble asked why he would take such a risk. Roland said because Anna and Nina were not tools to be moved around. His city could become a place where witches lived openly. Then Border City would not just survive winter, it would become the beginning of a new world. Nina's secret soon forced another crisis. Her father, Baron, discovered that his daughter had been visiting the prince's mansion. He confronted Roland, furious and terrified. If people learned Nina was a witch, the noble families would destroy her. The church would never allow a noble bloodline to hide demonic power. Baron wanted to take her away before the prince's plans ruined her life. Roland did not threaten him. If Nina fled, she would spend her life hunted. If her family locked her away, fear would slowly kill her. If she remained in Border City, used her healing power to save people during the demonic period, the people would not see a monster. Baron demanded a promise. What if the city fell? Roland gave Baron a prince's promise. If the city broke, Nina would leave before he did. He would not sacrifice a child to prove his courage. That promise turned suspicion into a fragile kind of trust. Not because she was more valuable than others. He had taken responsibility for Anna's life, and that broke Baron's anger. A prince had lowered himself not with weakness, but with sincerity. Baron knelt and swore loyalty. From that moment, Roland gained not only Nina's father, but another noble house inside Border City. The final months before winter became a race against time. Carl redesigned sections of the wall to include traps, firing platforms, storage chambers, and emergency shelters. Carter trained the militia until their hands blistered. Anna produced controlled heat for cement and metalwork. Nina practiced healing under pressure, learning to close wounds quickly without exhausting herself. Bibble watched from the shadows, still unsure whether Roland's dream was courage or madness. Roland's new magic also began to take shape. From his knowledge of chemistry and engineering, He experimented with freezing mixtures, pressure, powders, fire channels. One nearly burned Carter's eyebrows off. This world had magic, but it also had minerals, temperature, force, and structure. Roland did not need to replace magic with science. As winter approached, Anna became restless. Bibble visited her and Nina one night, trying one last time to convince them to leave. She spoke of the holy mountain, where witches could live free from human greed. She warned that even Roland's human magic might not survive the coming cold. Anna's answer surprised her. Anna spoke of her past. She remembered her mother dying in flames and smoke. She remembered her father selling her for 25 gold coins. She remembered standing in a cage while people cheered for her death. The world had never given her a holy mountain. Roland had. But a place where someone looked at her power and saw possibility instead of sin. For Anna, Border City had already become sacred. Nina looked outside and saw white flakes falling from the sky. The first snowfall covered the rooftops, the wall, the mines, and the forest road. Then winter answered him. The first snow fell and the demonic period began. The first days were quiet, and that silence frightened veterans more than noise. Scouts reported strange tracks near the forest. At night, the mountain seemed to breathe black fog. Roland ordered the militia to sleep in shifts. Then the first signal fire burned. Carter rushed to the wall. The people gathered behind the defenses, some carrying children, some clutching tools, some praying to the same church that had abandoned them. Roland climbed the wall and saw the forest line trembling. A mutant wolf emerged first, larger than any animal should be. Behind it came more shapes: wolves, bears, insect-like beasts, and flying shadows circling above the trees. The militia nearly broke before the battle began. Roland raised his hand and gave the first command. They crossed the first marked line, and Anna ignited the hidden channels. Fire ran across the ground like a burning serpent. Powder traps erupted under the snow. The first monsters died before touching the wall. The people of Border City saw something they had never seen before. Demonic beasts could bleed. Carter ordered archers to fire. Smith-made bolts rained from the wall. The militia pushed stones from the upper platforms. Anna's flames burned the climbing beasts, but stopped before reaching the wooden supports. Every blast proved that the witch once meant for execution was now holding the city together. A flying beast dove toward the wall, snatching a soldier into the air. Iron Axe, the hunter from the Hemogin clan, leaped forward and buried his weapon into its wing. The beast crashed against the rampart, crushing stone and men alike. Nina ran to him despite the chaos. Her hands trembled, but she forced herself to breathe. The sticky healing fluid spread over his wound. They had been taught that witch power was demonic. But nothing about Nina's magic looked evil. One old miner whispered that the girl was not a demon. Border City survived its first night without Long Song. Supplies had been used faster than expected, and the tracks near the forest showed that the first wave had been only a test. Long Song's spies watched from a distant ridge and carried the news back to Duke Ryan. Border City had not fallen. The witches were helping. To Ryan, this was worse than rebellion. It was proof that control could be broken. 2 nights later, men disguised as laborers approached a lower section of the wall. They carried oil, firestones, and maps stolen from the construction office. Their goal was not to defeat the city directly. It was to destroy one wall joint before the second monster wave. If the breach opened at the right moment, the beasts would do the rest. Beeble caught them first. Invisible in the falling snow, She watched them kneel by the cement seam. The spies moved toward the oil, ready to ignite it. She appeared behind them and placed a dagger at one man's neck. The second attacker moved faster than expected and slashed her shoulder. Beeble killed neither of them. Carter arrived with guards. One saboteur swallowed poison before he could be questioned. The captured saboteur named Long Song, and the city finally saw who wanted it eaten. The fortress that claimed to protect them had tried to feed them to monsters. Roland did not hide the truth. At dawn, he showed the captured saboteur to the militia and the workers. He explained that their enemies were not only beasts from the mountain. Some humans feared a free border city more than they feared monsters. Long Song needed them weak, hungry, and dependent. If the wall stood, the old chains would break. Their fear of winter transformed into hatred for the fortress that had used them for generations. Roland turned that anger into discipline. Every citizen would defend the wall because the wall now represented their independence. Meanwhile, Beeble recovered under Nina's care. She tried to pretend the wound did not hurt. Nina scolded her like a little sister scolding an older one. Anna watched quietly. Even Bibble froze when Nina's blunt innocence cut through her mystery. Blood stained the snow around the wounded guards. Bibble finally admitted that Roland's city was different. Humans here had started to look at witches with gratitude instead of disgust. That frightened her almost as much as hatred did. Hope was dangerous because it made people stay. Roland used the sabotage maps to identify weak points in the wall. Carl reinforced them with emergency braces. Anna hardened new cement batches through the night. Carter reorganized the militia into squads. Nina prepared a hidden medical station. Iron Axe trained hunters to fight flying beasts from elevated platforms. The second wave came during a blizzard. The monsters used the snow as cover. They attacked from multiple directions, testing the wall, the river road, and the old mine entrance. Roland realized too late that some beasts were not trying to climb. The old mine tunnels ran beneath part of the city. If the monsters reached them, they could emerge behind the wall. Roland ordered a dangerous countermeasure. Anna would flood the tunnel entrance with fire, but only after miners confirmed civilians were clear. Too early and trapped workers might die. Too late, and beasts would enter the city. Carter led the evacuation himself. Iron Axe held the tunnel mouth with a small squad. Nina stayed close, healing injuries as fast as they appeared. The beasts in the tunnel moved like shadows with teeth. One soldier broke and tried to run. Iron Axe grabbed him and shouted that running would only bring the monsters to his family. When Carter's signal finally came, Anna unleashed a narrow river of flame into the tunnel. The blast lit the snow from below like a buried sunrise. The digging beast died before reaching the inner streets, but Anna collapsed after the attack. Bibble's face darkened with real fear. Anna's awakening was close. Bibble explained what she had avoided saying clearly before. Every witch faced a dangerous awakening. Power expanded inside the body like a storm. If the witch controlled it, she became stronger. If she failed, the power consumed her. Anna's fire was already unstable. The stress of battle had pushed her toward the edge. Roland refused to let fear decide the answer. He asked Bibble what the Witch Association did during an awakening. She described isolation chambers, cooling stones, spell circles, and experienced witches guiding the flow of power. Roland listened like an engineer reading emergency specifications. Then he adapted the idea to what Border City had. He built a cooling chamber using stone, cement, water channels, ice shipments stored from his earlier experiment. Nina would monitor Anna's body. Bibble would guide the magical flow. Roland would control temperature and pressure from outside. It was risky, improvised, and probably insane. But doing nothing would kill Anna. Anna entered the chamber before dawn. She looked at Roland and asked whether he was afraid of her. Anna was burning, but not because she was a demon. Water in the channels hissed into steam. Bibble shouted instructions. Nina cried, but kept working. Roland adjusted vents, opened cooling lines, and ordered ice added in measured amounts. Too much cold could shock her body. Too little would let the fire run wild. Memories tore through Anna. Her father betraying her. The execution crowd. The moment Roland placed his coat over her shoulders. The promise of a city where witches could live? They did not know the technical details, but they knew Anna was fighting something. Many of them knew they were alive because of her. Inside the chamber, Anna's flames turned white. Bill panicked. White flame meant the power was breaking past normal control. Roland ordered everyone to hold. He opened the final water channel, not to extinguish the flame, but to create steam pressure through vents above the chamber. The heat rose. The pressure released. The white fire vented skyward instead of consuming her, and Anna walked out alive. When the door opened, her flames no longer thrashed. They obeyed. Bill looked at Roland with something close to disbelief. His human engineering had not replaced witch knowledge. Anna stepped outside, and the people saw her. The same witch they had once demanded to hang had survived a storm of fire, returned stronger. Soon the entire yard filled with applause. Anna lowered her head, overwhelmed. For the first time in her life, humans were not cheering for her death. They were cheering because she had lived. But the demonic period was not over. That evening, scouts reported a third wave forming near the mountain pass. Roland studied the reports and understood the pattern. The first wave tested traps. The third would attack with intelligence. Some force inside the mountain was directing them. And from the north, hidden under the storm clouds, a creature opened its eyes. The final attack began before sunrise. No signal fire was needed. It rolled down the mountain like thunder, shaking snow from rooftops and turning every face toward the forest. The beasts came in formation. Mutant wolves ran in front to trigger traps. Flying hybrids circled above the archers. Behind them moved a giant creature covered in black horn and ice, tall enough to look over parts of the wall. Roland ordered the first line of traps held until the heavier beasts entered range. The militia waited, terrified but disciplined. Anna stood on the wall with controlled white flame in her hands. Nina waited below with healers. Bibble moved invisibly near the outer field, marking the leader's movements. Carter commanded the squads. Carl watched the wall joints like a father watching a sick child. Iron Axe gripped his weapon and smiled like the battle had finally become worth his name. The first explosion shattered the snowfield. The second wave of traps broke the bear line. Arrows and bolts filled the air. Flying beasts dove, but Iron Axe's hunters dragged them down with hooked chains. Anna's white flames cut through the monsters with terrifying precision. She no longer burned everything. She burned only what she chose. The giant leader reached the wall and struck it. The impact cracked the outer layer. Carl shouted for reinforcement teams. Workers ran forward under fire, pouring quick cement into gaps and bracing supports while beasts clawed at the structure. They were miners and builders, defending a wall they had made with their own hands. A section of the parapet collapsed. Carter nearly fell, but Roland pulled him back. For a moment, everyone saw their prints on the front line, covered in snow and dust. Refusing to retreat, Then Roland gave the order he had saved for the end. The ice powder shipments, the pressure chambers, the fire channels. The sealed vents were all part of one trap beneath the outer killing field. Anna ignited the first channel. Steam pressure built under the frozen ground. The beast stepped onto Bibble's mark, and Roland dropped his hand. A column of steam, stone, ice, and flame blasted upward, throwing the giant beast off balance. Iron Axe led a charge from the side gate, striking the creature's exposed leg. Carter's squad fired bolts into the crack. Anna focused her white flame into a single spear of heat, drove it through the wound. The leader screamed, and the remaining beasts hesitated. Border City counterattacked. Bibble appeared on the leader's back and drove her blade into one eye. Nina kept the wounded alive long enough to return them to the wall. Roland ordered every reserve into the final push. The surviving beasts fled toward Dragonspine Mountain. For a long moment, no one spoke. People cried, laughed, hugged, and collapsed in the snow. Long Song had not saved them. The church had not saved them. A failed prince, a betrayed witch, a noble child healer, a hidden association agent. Workers, miners, hunters, and citizens had saved themselves. Roland stood on the damaged wall and looked over Border City. The wall had proved that human skill could stand beside magic. Anna had proved that a feared witch could become a city's shield. Nina had proved that mercy could defeat the church's oldest lie. News of the victory would spread. Long Song would be humiliated. Duke Ryan would not forgive it. Garcia would learn that the brother she tried to kill had become dangerous. The church would hear rumors of witches healing soldiers and burning monsters under a prince's protection. Once the church understood Border City, it would come. Bibble warned Roland that this victory might bring a larger war. Roland answered that war had already begun the moment someone poisoned his wine. Anna stood beside him, her white flame fading into the cold morning air. Nina held her father's hand while wounded soldiers thanked her. Carl looked at the wall like a dream made of stone. Carter saluted. Barav, who had once doubted every decision, bowed his head. Snow continued to fall, but this time the city did not run. Roland looked toward the distant mountains where the sacred mountain might be hidden. Somewhere out there, more witches were still hunted. Somewhere behind holy walls, the church was still turning fear into law. Somewhere in a royal palace, enemies still believed Border City was weak. They were wrong. This winter, a dead prince had awakened. A witch meant for execution had become a guardian. A mining town had built a wall no one believed possible. The first crack appeared in the world the church had built. But beyond the snow, the church had only begun to notice Border City.